So you're going to build your PC, you've picked out most of the parts, you're going to pick out the CPU, and you are absolutely swamped by the sheer variety and amount of options, ranging, well, from a humble, cheap and cheerful dual core to, well, 1,000 core, 1,000 US dollar 16 core monsters. How do you choose? Well, today we are looking at what core count does in gaming and hopefully help you make a decision on what your next CPU really should be. So a bit of background on this, the test system that we're actually using today is my own personal rig, Dante's Inferno, with its GTX 1080, enough RAM to remove any bottlenecks there, and really be a somewhat reasonable estimation of what a mid to high range, PC would be, excluding the CPU. And as you all know, I own a 3950X. It's the heart of my rig. But what some of you may not know is that you can selectively disable different cores on your CPU, and particularly with a 16 core, that opens up a lot of options for testing out various configurations. So today we're going to be testing out 16 core, 12 core, 8 core, 6 core, 4 core, 2 core, and 2 cores without hyper-threading configurations. Now also to shake it up, considering this is a more real-world gaming, and it's a mid to high range system, so we'll be using more, higher settings than usual. So we're going to be introducing for the first time the 1440p benchmarks, which is, hopefully a better representation of what some of you at home might be doing. And on top of that, we're also introducing a few newer games to go ahead and, again, give a wider range of results. So the actual benchmarks themselves will be running at 1440p high settings with a newcomer, Far Cry 5, because honestly, I loved it, and hey, it makes a pretty good benchmark, so we'll be putting that in too. Also, GTA 5, Dirt Rally, War Thunder, Cinebench R15, Time Spy, and Firestrike. So we're going to start off with Cinebench then, just so we can go ahead and see the various performance drops across all configurations. As you can see, the 3950X's performance actually scales pretty well up and down the stack with what you'd expect with those cores being cut off. What is interesting to note though is that at the lower core counts, the layouts are being boosted higher than the higher core versions, which might lead to slightly better performance individually with each core disabled. Moving to Firestrike, however, we see our first glimpse of what's to come in the future. Now, as you can see by the total scores, 16 cores down all the way to 6 cores sees almost no performance difference, but when you get down to 4 cores, there begins to be a real drop in performance, losing some 15% over the previous results, and then falling off pretty sharply even more beyond that on the 2 core variants. What is interesting, however, is that despite the huge total performance drop-offs in the low end, the graphics score barely budged an inch. In Time Spy, we also see a repeat of previous trends. All the way down to 6 cores, the majority of the performance is retained, but that again, of course, drops off, pretty sharply. And for once, the lack of hyperthreading even damages our graphics score substantially, losing not far below 10% there too. Over in Dirt Rally, our first actual game, we see some interesting developments. With the exclusion of our 12-core configuration, almost all results from 4 to 16 cores had a minimum FPS of 120 to 130 FPS, and saw very similar maximum frames per second, with only a 20 FPS delta, almost all hitting 240 plus on average. But with the averages again, you can see a very similar story from 4 cores to 16. We only see a difference of 14.5 frames per second, all averaging in excess of 180 FPS. And that's all well and good, however, but looking at the dual core results, the results fall pretty quickly apart, with the minimums getting as low as 80, the maximums hitting lower than the average FPS of the other results, and only hitting 120 on average, their worst situation being without hyperthreading. Things only got weirder in the War Thunder Pacific Day test, as realistically we saw no noticeable difference between all results on average, but we did see a steady decline in minimum FPS down the stack, to the point where even on 2 cores you might only really be able to get away with it on this title. Moving on to our newcomer Far Cry 5, we have some interesting things here to note as well. For on neither of our two core configurations would run at all, meaning that the with this game, at least you need a minimum of 4 cores to run it at all, but oh well. Moving on to the test results, what's interesting here is that all results ran pretty damn similarly. With only a 3 FPS delta on averages, a 6 FPS delta on the maximums, and a more substantial but still pretty negligible 9 FPS delta on the minimum. Really showing the need, well, a minimum need for a quad core in 2020, but ideally a 6-core system seems to be the strong pick for those with, well, a bit more of a budget who don't want to sacrifice much performance. Finally, we move on to GTA 5, where our previous trends seem to make themselves known once again. 6-core configurations and up saw no performance uplift over the stack. 4 cores again seems to be a bit cut down, but not bad performance by any means. We've granted an abysmal minimum FPS, but that appears to be an issue with GTA 5 on this system, loading in assets, but excluding that, our averages had a delta of 3 FPS between the 6 and 16 cores, which jumps to 10.5 FPS between the 16 and 4 core configurations, and almost an indistinguishable difference between all 4 core and above configurations. With max FPS again, there was a pretty heavy frame drop moving to 2 cores, but they did at least average over 60 FPS. So what can we conclude from all of that? Well, if you are on a shoestring budget, well, you really do need a minimum of 4 threads at least, preferably 4 cores and 8 threads, but at the very minimum 4 cores. So really my recommendation for those of you that really do not have much budget to spend on a CPU at all, get yourselves either a Ryzen 3 3100 or a 3300X, because, well, they're both 4 cores and 8 threads, they can match up to a 7700K, and realistically, they are very, very good picks for a budget gamer. Or if you want to do a stopgap solution, so you can buy yourself a CPU, well, an APU now, and then buy a better GPU later, because you'll have some time to save up, the Ryzen 3 3200G is also a brilliant choice in that regard. If you have a bit more budget and you don't really want to sacrifice much performance at all, then I'd really recommend going for the Ryzen 5 3600, as generally speaking it holds a lot better on its own in other titles, not to mention it will go ahead and run Far Cry 5, GTA 5, everything else a lot smoother, and of course have better multi-core performance when you're creative. However though, if you are, well, a bit of a frame rate snob, or you just want the highest possible FPS, what you could also do is go ahead and get an Intel i5 10600K, get a decent cooler of it, and of course a Z490 board, and it's been, well, shown by Gamers Nexus that that overclocked can actually match the i9 10900K in sheer FPS, even with a 2080 Ti, so that is also a very good choice if all you do is gaming. If you do anything else, however, again, go for the Ryzen 5 3600. If you are, however, doing more CPU-intensive work, and I mean really CPU-intensive work, whether it be video rendering, 3D rendering, you know, heavy streaming, well, in that case then an 8-core Ryzen 7 3700X, or even a 12-core Ryzen 9 3900X would be a better choice for you. But if you're a small business, a hobbyist, or you run your own YouTube channel, then, of course, the king of the pack, the Ryzen 9 3950X, would be the best choice for you. So yeah, take all that information as you please. Those are my recommendations, and that's where I'm going to go ahead and call the video. So anyway, like the video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it. Links to everything featured today, and of course all my recommendations will be in the description below, along with my Facebook, Patreon, and Twitch page links. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more content from me as always. This is the 117th Con, signing off. Stay safe out there folks, and I will catch you all in the next one.